Just welcome to be a very impactful and important conversation. It's going to be recorded too, for goodness sake, so you can watch it again and share it with others, of course. We are international fluoride-free fighters. We are the ones to advocate to end fluoridation in the towns and cities and states where we live. It's usually a local issue. Of course, the federal government in the United States has some influence over the fluoridation policies, but overall, it's a local issue. It's your local utility that's actually buying the fluoridation chemicals and titrating it into your water supply. So local organization is the name of the game. And that's what we're here for. We're helping each other across the world. Wherever you live, you have a certain experience, and you've come to these conversations with, in many cases, years and years and years of experience campaigning in your area. And we want to take advantage of all of that wisdom, all that experience to share with each other and really inspire each other and lift each other up too, because we all know it's a tough fight. We're up against some incredible opposition. The more you're in it, the more you learn about the opposition, and the more you're surprised by the extent of the opposition, how coordinated they are. The topic for today, the messaging that our opponents do is of a very high caliber. They are operating with a level of sophistication in the realm of propaganda and word magic, if you will, that allows them to turn things upside down, to tell you that while you look at someone's teeth that's fluorotic, that means they have dental fluorosis and it's staring you right in the face, and they tell you it's because the fluoride in the water makes it that way, at the same time as telling you, we put it in the water because it's good for your teeth. So they turn things inside out and upside down, and they're very good at it. They've also chronicled all of our best arguments, and they know what our best arguments are, and they actively go to work to damage, to destroy any validity that our arguments hold. Even when we say it's unethical, you think that would be a silver bullet. It's unethical. It's not the government's authority to put a medication in the water. They say, well, you have the option not to drink it. Today's topic is Master the Message. We're following the chapters from the book, Something in the Water, 12 Steps to Ending Fluoridation in Your Town. And it is the fifth step we're focusing on today. Messaging is everything. In life, in a way, communication is everything. So we're definitely going to spend a good amount of time, and every campaigner should spend a good amount of time understanding how to craft good messaging. And we're going to do that today, and we'll even spend some time with your messaging, with your campaigns, so that we can consider this a kind of a workshop. But I do want to start with a little review, because here we are in the fifth month, and by the time you've done the first 4 steps, you're in a position where you're going to need to know, okay, what am I going to communicate to what audience and what's my objective? But let's just do a quick review. The first 4 steps. In the first step, confront the deception. We spend time as an advocate to end the fluoridation of the water, confronting the deception itself. We ourselves as advocates have to come to terms with it. We ourselves have to have an understanding or an explanation of it that makes sense, and that we have our arms around it, that we aren't fooling ourselves about what we're really dealing with, collusion between government, industry, academia, media, and others. At the same time, when we go out to campaign, we can't just be talking about the conspiracy. In fact, it's counterproductive, particularly in the beginning when you're first meeting someone, to do that. So there's in the book, there's advice about how to steer the conversation back to taking action based on the knowledge that you give people of the harms and the medical ethics that are being breached. What the question is, now that you know the truth about fluoridation, what do you want to do about it? And avoid going down the rabbit hole of trying to speculate about the various motivations that keeps fluoridation flowing. In step 2, we address the need to protect yourself. As long as fluoridation chemicals are in your water, it's important that we all take care of our well-being as advocates. We need to be healthy. We need to be our best. And so drinking fluoridated water is not part of a healthy lifestyle. And we addressed a number of ways to reduce your exposure, including forms of filtration in your home and other places. And then we recognize that when you yourself learn the basics of filtration and harm reduction, you become an expert in that way to people who know very little or nothing about fluoridation and how to avoid it. And so during your campaigns, not only are you saving yourself from getting fluoridated, you're representing yourself with credibility to others and giving them some advice about how they can reduce their exposure. That again establishes your credibility and your expertise. In step 3, we then start in earnest dealing with the politics of fluoridation. And everybody has to take the time to map your jurisdiction. Step 3, map your jurisdiction. In this step, you're invited to do the research required to find out, by what authority does your utility add fluoridation to the water? What are the geographic considerations of your utility? Does it reach just your city? Does it go beyond your city limits? Oftentimes, the water systems don't fall only within a city, or some parts of cities are fluoridated and other parts of the same city are not fluoridated. Every city is different in terms of their fluoridation and the laws that apply to their fluoridation. Very important example is state mandates. So I live in California, and there's what is known as the state mandate, which requires that every city over a certain number of water customers that they fluoridate their water. So to understand the legalities of fluoridation, court rulings that apply to your jurisdiction, resolutions and ordinances and rules and regulations that apply to fluoridation, is very important for you to understand. Because as we get to the 4th step, that's when you just start to design a strategy based on a very strong fact-based understanding of your jurisdiction. Step 4 is choosing a pathway to victory. And in that step, we basically review 5 different broad avenues to political change that you have available to you. And based on what you learned from step 3, you choose one of these 4 broad avenues to make the political change you need in your area. They are, in brief, the first and most cost-effective is direct lobbying of your elected officials. Go in and make an appointment with them and talk with them and make them an ally. You have to try that first. There's very little cost involved in that. But if that doesn't work, then you want to consider other things. For example, starting a ballot measure proposition. And there's a lot of different interesting things about the way you craft the language of your ballot measure. You yourself could also go and run for office, which puts you on the ballot. And you can use your candidacy as a platform for bringing the question of fluoridation to people who maybe have never even heard about it before. And you can fold it in with a broader set of platform issues, maybe environmental or health issues related, or freedom of choice issues. And then there is, of course, always another avenue available to you through the court system. So suing your city or finding any kind of avenue to use the court system to exploit some of these contradictions, whether it's a medicant or whether it's a water treatment, whether it's a justification through the police powers we've talked about the police powers is very important. Many utilities, like the one where I live, give themselves authority to do what's good for us by medicating us through the water. And then finally, the final pathway to political change is what we call direct action. And that's all the kinds of things that people love to do: get out and make noise, do a protest, do letter writing campaigns, different kinds of events, musical events. It's kind of open-ended. It's a whole variety of things. And I always like to mention, one day maybe I'll do it. You can find out when the chemicals are being delivered to your utility and go lay your body down on the road in front of the truck. The direct action brings attention to your campaign. You want to choose wisely so that you get the attention that you need. In fact, it's a form of communication. So that brings us to today's topic, which is messaging. And now that you have chosen your general pathway, you have the need to craft any number of messages as a part of your overall campaign to achieve your campaign objectives. And so I'll just give you a brief overview of what's important as far as communications. Again, everything is communication. Everything you do is a communication. And so you want to be aware of three things at all times when you're communicating. One is, who is your audience? Okay, that's going to determine your message. And two, your objective with that audience. So you need to be very clear. So I'll just simply say that a lot of people, when they're very enthusiastic about campaigning, they want to say a lot of things about a lot of things because there's a lot to say. Everything from how it got started, the conspiracy behind it, the history of it, the health effects, the ethics of it. And people have a lot of things to say about a lot of things about fluoridation. But when you're being a responsible and effective communicator, you are always aware that your message, as you craft it, is designed to achieve a specific objective with a specific audience. So let's take, for example, the direct lobbying of your elected officials. That's one of the pathways to victory. And you make an appointment with your mayor, for example. Okay, so now your audience is a very clear, distinct audience. It is one person, the mayor, or perhaps the mayor and his or her staff. And so you can see right away that you don't want to say everything that there is to say about everything related to fluoride. You want to say only some things to this particular audience on the occasion when you meet with him or her. And you also, before you even begin your meeting, you want to have a very clear objective with that audience. So when I say objective, by the end of your communication, by the time you've delivered your message, your audience has either changed their mind, their feelings, or their behavior in a way that you intend from the outset. So these three things are in constant relationship to each other. You have the message itself, you have the audience that you're speaking to, and the objective that you have in mind for that audience. I hope you understand how simple it is. That's what I hope you appreciate, that what I'm bringing to you is universal, and you can use it in every area of your life too. This is a simple set of principles for all communication. Who's your audience? What's your specific objective with that audience? And then craft your message to achieve that objective with that audience. Again, so if you're meeting, for example, with your mayor, the objective is to have them become an ally, to have them to choose to fight fluoridation with you, to find allies on the city council, for example, to perhaps at minimum have a hearing or some sort of public forum where the health experts come forth and try to provide their rationale with experts from the fluoride-free side also doing that. You might have an objective with your elected official that they do some inquiries into the health department and demand records or any kind of information that they do their own investigation of the practices of fluoridation and the authority upon which they have it, and does it not also perhaps break other rules, like is it not carcinogenic? I mean, there's a whole variety of things you can get your elected officials to do when you have those very clear objectives. And so then all the material you bring, all the facts, all the information, the handout that you're going to leave behind with your elected officials while you're lobbying them, it's all intended to get them to become an ally and take specific actions that will help move the ball forward in ending fluoridation in your town. if, for example, you are doing a ballot measure, now your audience is the general public. It's a different kind of conversation. You have a different objective. Initially, you need to get them to sign the petition, even to qualify for the ballot, to qualify this measure to be on the ballot. So that is a very specific objective. And you'll be with your volunteers out in the field talking to the general public. So right away, the things you select to say will be different than if you were talking to the mayor. There's maybe some overlap, but again, the practice is to just be very disciplined with yourself and say, okay, today, who is my audience? And today, what do I want my audience? How do I want them to feel, think, or behave differently? And then compose your message accordingly. And when I say compose your message, of course, that means creating any kind of supporting documentation, graphs, data to bring to bear to support your message. And you can see that this is, again, very helpful to simplify your activities, and make them more effective. Because in the world of fluoridation, there's just so many topics you could go. There's so much information like if you went to the Fluoride Action Network, for example. I mean, it's just a treasure trove of information, and I highly recommend it as a resource. But when you are very clear about what your objective is and who your audience is, then when you go to the Fluoride Action Network's website, you can be much more selective and focused about what you need to support your message, and you don't get lost and misdirected, because there's so much it's very easy to get overwhelmed. So the simplicity of objective, message, and audience, those three things together really help you in so many ways. So today, what I want to do is spend some time with you all with your campaigns. I want to hear of course, as always, we want to hear your experience, how it's going with your campaign. Maybe we can learn from each other in a broad sense. But if you're open to it, I'm happy to work with you on any specific communications that you have in front of you that you're actively engaged in right now. I know, Gilles, you're working in the courts, for example. But it's as a campaign, you have messaging, you'll have a specific message for the specific audience of the lawyers you're working with. The lawyer, in fact, is in the complaint that he or she's writing is also a communication. It has an objective with a certain audience, if you recognize that. But also part of your campaign includes fundraising. So that's even a different audience. That's the general public or fluoride-free people who are on the fluoride-free team. You want to craft a message, the objective of which is to have them donate. So again, if you're open to it today, we can spend some time in a kind of a workshop mode where you choose one or more communications that are timely and relevant to your campaign right now. And we'll just apply these three principles and see where. So, and there's just one more thing I want to say about communication that we can't overlook, and that is you, the messenger. So yes, we're going to be talking a lot about how to craft a message to achieve a certain objective with a certain audience, but all the while, there's you, the messenger. So I just want always to be cognizant of the fact that you have the responsibility, the duty, and the opportunity to be an amazing messenger. So the way you present yourself, the way you appear, the style that you use when you're speaking, the amount of facts and data that you can bring to your message, and just your overall credibility and your ability to get people to listen to you. Those are things that are also important to communication. So again, there's the message itself based on who's the audience and what's your objective, but you want to always be aware that you're the one who's bringing the message, and it's going to make a big difference of how you show up. So again, let's just start either way. If you have a specific communication you want to roll up your sleeves and get started working on right now, we can do that. But I'm always open to hearing, some experience you have. So maybe there was a communication you've settled on, or that you figured out that it really works with a certain audience. Or maybe you've tried different communications and you found that, I've tried over and over again this one message and it just doesn't work no matter how I try. It should work, but it doesn't work. So whether success or not so great success, we can all learn. But let's talk about communication. Let's talk about communication inside of campaigns to end fluoridation in your town. Who wants to start? Go ahead, Ron. Tell us your campaign, the name of your campaign, where you are, and what communications you've tried or what you're about to try.
I'm on Oregon. We decided to assemble, as in the First Amendment. And that was 4.5 years ago. So you look up how to assemble, and it takes 5 or 6 people to do a certain number of things. And you have fulfilled the requirements to assemble. Then on Oregon, Article 1, Section 1 of the Oregon Constitution says that all power is inherent in the people, and at any time they have the right to change or abolish as they see fit. Basically, that's the gist of it. So we assumed that mantle, and then we informed the U.S. DOJ, the FBI, the U.S. Marshals, the Marine Corps, the Attorney General, the Executive Division of the State of Oregon, the Judiciary of the State of Oregon, 36 sheriffs, and they all understood, and it was signed, sealed, stamped, witnessed, and mailed by Universal Postal Union Treaty specifications. And we had proof of service. And the proof of service was to living testimony in the form of an affidavit of truth by a living man or woman. And the testimony is whatever you want to say in regards to whatever it is that needs to be addressed. Then at the end of that, and it doesn't have to be pages, you should be able to get a complete thought with the address and closure and everything down on one page. If you got more than one page, you need to edit. So you have one page and you sign it, and then 2 of the group that was formed in an assembly and then a social compact, that group, that document has been acquiesced to. They have 7, 14, and 21 days in the de jure jurisdiction. I loved it when you were talking jurisdiction. It's all jurisdiction, everything. So in the de jure jurisdiction, you warn them 3 times and give them an opportunity to correct 3 times, and then they acquiesce and default 3 times. That takes 21 days in the de jure jurisdiction. In the de facto jurisdiction, the benevolent form of martial law that is on 49 of the other states, that has turned malevolent, that group that is governing, that is not government, but that is governing in de facto, that group on your state and nationally are doing things that are just really wicked. They're evil. Poisoning people with fluoride is just part of the issue. Whether you want to believe it or not, that pandemic of COVID and the action of the the masking, distancing, testing, and then vaccinating with something that was not a vaccine, that whole thing, that was not for our benefit. It was planned and executed, and you can look it up. They made the plan in a meeting in New York where a whole bunch of them got together and talked about culling the population. It's all there. It's written. It's a fact. You have to deal with those things. So we decided that we were going to deal with it locally, just exactly like you said. 5 or 6 people that you know and trust and can work with is all it takes, and 30 days, and the paperwork is not difficult. $50 in postage and a seal that you buy at well, I don't know, Office Depot, I guess. And you can lawfully do all that you have to do to provide yourself with, on paper, you haven't got all the people together because there's only 6 of you, but this is a republic, not a democracy. So you do not need a majority to do anything. You need a social compact. So your social compact in 30 days can do all the paperwork. Your grand jury is done. You have your paperwork for your court. You've eliminated martial law. You have done the preparation so that you could return to a place where it's actually true that they take a proper oath to a proper constitution, to a proper government that is not incorporated. A court that is incorporated in profit for businesses, that's not government, that's a business. They're ripping you off to support their business. That kind of stuff has to stop, and
Has to stop.
only you can do it.
All
I
right, good.
yield.
Thank you, Ron. You said quite a lot. So just I just want to check in with folks. First, that's definitely a perfect example. I want to use your example for the sake of this lesson, which is master the message. You definitely had a message. You definitely had a specific audience in mind, and you had a specific objective as well with those documents. So we'll unpack that in a second. I want to ask: are people familiar with this sort of out of the box approach to politics?
I have no idea what he was talking about, honestly.
No idea. We talking.
You
Anyone
totally
else?
lost me in most of it, and then to go into the okay, and then to go into the pandemic, the flu and stuff like that. When people do that, and I see that happen a lot, veering off into other things, to me it muddies the water, and I may have a different perspective or not sure of the facts. And so when people throw in something totally unrelated and mix it all up.
Who else is familiar with what Ron was saying about constitutional republic form of government and the self-governance principle that America is founded on?
It's a different system here in Australia. I understand what he was saying. I also appreciate the fact that he's concerned about where the pandemic started, but I also get the message that you don't dilute it with reference to other things that people think you're just a conspiracist. You just give them one message at a time, very, very simple stuff. And that's what I've been doing all along. But I've had a few years off because the health department fluoridated our town against a lot of people's wishes, largely due to the fact that I'd campaigned so hard about it. And I sort of thought, what's the use? But it's given me a lot of inspiration to hear about the fluoride issue going through the courts in America. And people over here just are absolutely dumbfounded when I tell them about it. So I'm thinking I'll get our local doctors on side again, because about 20 of them signed a letter to the health department and the health department ignored them. And that was after I alerted them to the issues.
Okay, good. Still more communications to break down. So I definitely want to take a minute to break down each one of these. So when you mentioned, for example, the doctor's message to the health board, the audience is clear, right? It's the health authorities. The objective, what was the behavior, or how did the doctors expect it was ignored, you said, but what was the objective of them? And they want the health department to think, feel, or behave differently.
They wanted the fluoride not to be put in the water, because I started the campaign. I went to see one of my local doctors and started the campaign there, and I took them a copy of Paul's book. My doctor read the whole thing over the weekend. Anyway, 25 out of 40 doctors, I think it was, something like that, decided that they would sign the letter that she wrote to say that this stuff is not sufficiently scientifically validated. We don't want it put in our water. But the health department came down and more or less bribed the local council to put it in. And it was a slam dunk decision, and there was nothing I could do at the time. But if I'd have thought about it, taking them to court might have put a stop to the compulsory fluoridation.
Right.
So I see
What
the
we're talking
little
about
kids
is an
next
example
door.
of,
Yeah.
you're illustrating an example of direct lobbying, where you're going to the officials in positions of power, and you are communicating with them with an objective to have them stop the fluoridation. That was the clear request, right? That was the clear objective of this doctor's letter, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
To the health department.
Whether this is the thing, whether your message works or it doesn't work, to be very clear about who your audience is and what objective you have for that audience is going to help you improve your message. So if you're very clear about who your audience is and you're very clear about what your objective is, you do your best to create a message to achieve that objective with that audience. But if you don't succeed in achieving that objective with that audience, you can, as you said, you can take an entirely different tack. You can go look at the court system, you can do other things, but you can also look to see if there's a way to improve your message so that you can achieve that objective with that audience. That's the power in knowing and being very clear about your objective. Maybe there's room for improving your message in order to achieve that objective. At some point, we do make a determination that either it's because they're corrupt and no amount of messaging is going to make a difference, or they have other incentives, who knows, or maybe they are not yet convinced of the harms and that they need to stop it. So, but in just straight messaging, there you are. But I also heard there's a message as a campaigner, Jillian, you were the one to reach out to your doctor. And this letter only came to existence because of a message that you delivered. You had an audience in mind, a doctor or doctors in your town. This is something a lot of campaigners do. They'll reach out to dentists or doctors, and you can write a letter to all the dentists in your town. You can develop a message, the objective of which is to get them to join your campaign and to vocally support the end of artificial water fluoridation in your town. And so one objective can lead to another objective, can lead to another objective. So these are messages you see, they're all over the place. Every time you go to campaign, you're communicating. And so to be more effective and to really make things simpler for you, the campaigner, it works to be very clear with yourself and your team. What is our audience? What is our objective with this audience? And what's the best message we can craft to achieve that objective? So Ron, let's take your example too, because you brought up this very important, let's just take the first document, just because there are so many documents, right, in sequence that you're delivering. I'm familiar with the common law approach. I actually teach it. Commonerlaw.com is my company. You can look at commonerlaw.com, Ron, and you'll see the work I've been doing to educate people on the Republican or constitutional natural law foundation of American law, commonerlaw.com, Ron. But yeah, so the very first message was in the very first document. You had a very specific audience. Do you remember, folks? He was saying the elected officials, many of the elected officials in the state of Oregon, as well as a good number of sheriffs. They were all your audience. What they all have in common is that they're elected officials, correct? Elected and or appointed officials. And so let's just take the very first message. Again, I understand that your campaign it was a series of messages built upon the other, based on the assumption that they weren't going to respond to the first one. So you anticipate that and you come with a follow-up message. But even just taking the first one alone, was it a notice of liability or not a notice of, what was it? The very first document.
Our very first document was petition for redress of grievance.
There you go. So what was we know the audience now, right? All these elected and appointed officials in state of Oregon. What would you say was the objective meaning in the best of all possible worlds, if your message got across and you were successful, how would your audience think, feel, or behave differently?
Our objective,
of grievances.
Say again, I missed it. I talked over you.
It's okay. The petition for redress of grievances if you look at it, even if you read it, you will discern that there is a very specific objective that you had hoped to achieve. Even if you were, wisely not optimistic, of the petition for redress of grievances has a specific objective, intended objective for that audience. What was that specific objective?
The audience was Kate Brown, Suzanne Bonamici, Ron Wyden, and Jeff Merkley, 4 prominent politicians on Oregon that had all at one time or another in the public domain. Just key it in on DuckDuckGo. There's ample proof that at one time or another, and probably several times, they voted against my best interests in the Second Amendment by attempting to or by infringing upon my unalienable right. And from my point of view, first person, you have to have one person at least make one claim before you have anything that you can lawfully or legally pursue. And that's what we chose. And I was the one that made the claim, and it was backed by our assembly.
Mm-hmm.
And we informed them that they had this number of days to rebut the claim or to accept the fact that they had broken their oath, they had no honor, and they could no longer hold a position of trust.
That's it.
That was it.
Objective. A very potent, very powerful objective. So there's the audience, there's the objective, and the document itself succeeded or did not succeed in fulfilling that objective. And that's always the case. And you want to, when it comes to communicating, you always want to improve your communication by seeing whether your message worked or not. And I know that your program included the very real option that petition for redress of grievances wasn't going to have the result that you wanted immediately. So you followed up with still another communication, I know. So that's a great example of communication. Let's hear some more. Fluoride-free campaigners campaigning. You have messaging going on everywhere, whether you're talking to volunteers, whether you're talking to public officials, whether you're talking to each other, even your co-campaigners, whether you're talking to the media, whether you're talking to the average person on the street, at a farmer's market, tabling, whether your website is just one big message. In the book, something in the water, 12 steps to ending fluoridation in your a fair amount, as an example, is helping people come up with their website messaging, because it's different from place to place, what's going to connect with your community. In San Francisco, for example, we have Safe Water San Francisco. And after campaigning in San Francisco for a while and knowing the political background of San Francisco, which is very liberal, and there's a lot of identity politics going on, and so there were so we ended up with three separate messages. One is a racial discrimination based on the known disproportionate harms to African American and Hispanic people. We also have in San Francisco, for some reason, the small businesses have small, like, boutique restaurants and cafes and shops. They have quite a bit of clout in City Hall, because in San Francisco, people love all of our local little treasures that we have, and so those people have a fair amount of clout. And when they have to filter their water in order to provide at a restaurant, for example, safe water to their customers, that's an additional burden cost. So small business burden was another messaging category. We also looked at the people who are immunocompromised because of their health condition, for example, HIV/AIDS or other conditions. People don't need to be consuming fluoride. Again, another kind of politically potent group in San Francisco. The trick was to summarize all three of those separate messages and see what they all have in common. And in San Francisco, we determined the message would be that San Francisco's water can be safe for everyone. Now, that message works in San Francisco because San Franciscans want things to be safe for everyone. It's a very inclusive political town. And so we're able to lead with, say, water can be safe for everyone. And then when people say, well, tell me more about what you mean, you can say, well, people who are immunocompromised and African Americans and small businesses should be able to provide safe water to their customers without additional expense. So it allows us to deliver all these messages together, and that's how our website is organized. You'll see the big banner, Safe Water San Francisco. Our water can be safe for everyone. And then there's the specific topics that I just mentioned broken out. And so everyone has the need in a campaign for strong communications to think through who is our audience? What's our objective specifically? How do we want them to think, feel, or behave differently, having heard our message? And then to craft your message to get that objective. So let's hear some more examples of your campaigns and the messaging that you need, whether you've already got it polished and you want to share, or if it's some form of drafting and you want to work on it right now.
Well, I'll just share what. So I know a lot of you people have groups and you can work together, but I have not been able to find any other supporters. I know one guy and he lives in a distant town. And so I think my objective is just trying to find some like-minded people that then we can move forward. And so this year I made a commitment to myself to focus on two things: the fluoride issue and supporting pregnancy centers. And it just so happened they were going to have a big baby fair and they were going to have free booths. And I thought, well, what a perfect opportunity to present the risk or the option, know your fluoride sources, and just an informational, not a soapbox, to let people know about the risks of fluoride to their developing fetuses, and to give them the options to select fluoride-free living. Well, they turned down my application. They thought that wasn't the kind of thing they wanted in their baby fair. So I was a little bit disappointed, but I went as a guest to see what other vendors were there. And I thought, well, you know, if I can't have a table, that's fine. I'll make connections with the other vendors. And there were several groups that help mothers and infant development, and they mark development milestones. There was like 3 or 4 tables that were all about child development. And so I had some flyers made up, and I said to the one lady, so I'm sure you are aware of the risks of fluoride to developing brains. Oh, no, I didn't know. And so she was receptive. So I met a couple people that were receptive, some not so much, but I got everybody's card. So I got a big email list. And so, you know, I'm just kind of trying to me, that's one of a big hot button, even though I don't have babies, but you would think people with babies and caring about babies would care about this sort of thing. So that's kind of my objective, is to inform, but also to gain some other like-minded people that then we can move forward to the next step. And I'm thinking maybe this fall, when I get back from Alaska, maybe do the farmers market when it gets cooler, and have some flyers and just talk to people. So.
Yeah, it's very good. So you're like so many people, just getting started, and where you are is perfect. And you can see that, yes, the very most immediate first objective with any audience is to get their email. Basically, like you said, you collected their contact information. With the understanding that they're giving it to you because they want to learn more about ending fluoridation in your town. So perfect audience, great. You know, you went after that audience. You determined that audience was potentially receptive, right? And so you knew who your audience was, and then you even within the broader audience of participants, vendors, you even narrowed down more of those childhood development people. You really focused on those. And then you gave them some information. So that is the most baby step objective you can have, is just inform people, right? Sometimes people say planting seeds, but I do recommend that you go ahead and take that very next step and have an objective that they give you their contact information, so that you can continue to be in communication with them, provide them more information, and ultimately through email have further messages, the objective of which is to get them to join you in strategizing, join you in growing your numbers, join you in fundraising, join you in whatever pathway to victory you've chosen for your town, or maybe just to help you choose a pathway to victory. I assume you've done a fair amount of mapping your jurisdiction, Marie, so you know the scene, the terrain of your area pretty well, I bet. And now it's just a matter of choosing your pathway to victory. And it's good to do that with a committee, because that often has a lot to do with which pathway you choose. To be honest, is what sort of folks you have with you. So yeah, that's perfect. It's so classic when you're first starting out, to go to different events like yours, find people who are interested, give them just enough information so that they're interested, and you can get their contact information. And then that gives you the opportunity to make many more messages with that audience, with other objectives. Just kind of bring them along and keep inviting them to participate more and more. Wonderful, Marie. Thank you. Messaging, isn't it cool to be the one to make the difference? And you don't have to, how am I going to say this? Messaging is not hard. It's not like it's not like you have to dig a ditch, you know, or something, and get all sweaty and blistered or up, or, you know, it's not, you don't have to exert the thinking is the hardest part, the exertion of your mind to think about who is your audience, what specifically will be your objective, and then what message will provide that. It is hard work on the mental, but you don't have to break a sweat. You know what I mean? You know, you can do it from the comfort of your own home so often. So go ahead, Gilles.
Yes, there's many aspects that we could work on. In Quebec, we have the chance to be able to get it in the media. So we could get in the newspaper or radio or TV quite easily on the issue of fluoridation. The media are open in Quebec compared to anywhere else in North America. So we have done open letters, or we have sent, uh, I could say, message to the newspaper. What you could, there's a word I'm forgetting.
Letter to the editor?
Yeah, letter to the editor, or open letters, or even articles that we will send as groups, and normally with many signature of different groups, environmental groups, uh, opposition to fluoridation, lawyers, scientific researchers, PhDs, and things like that. So we put all those when we sign the letter, which makes a lot of weight for the media, and that's very important. So we get those letters. And then we normally ask the municipality to have a debate of both sides. And we do a presentation PowerPoint with something like 80 or 90 different slides on the issue, on the scientific, on the legal aspect, on the environmental aspect. So it's very difficult for the public health to defend their position because they're not very qualified in environment or something like that. So they won't bring proper element, and we know which element or which argument they're going to bring. So we always make a few slides that will demolish automatically their argument on that environmental point, or on the legal point, or the ethical point, or whatsoever. So that makes it very powerful. Another thing we try to do is get one or two councillor on the city council on our side, and sometimes we try to get them when there's an election, to get those people in the council. So we have a friend or friends in the council that will support our position. And the last thing we try to do is demolish completely the credibility of the public health on many different aspects. And the fact that, for example, that the product are not regulated by Health Canada for the purpose of treating individual, they cannot defend that. They cannot say, oh, it's not true. So what they do, they say it's a water treatment chemical. But how can a water treatment chemical, it could be used to treat people? That's unethical. So automatically their credibility is down. So we have succeeded in this way. And 95% of the municipality in Quebec, there's 3 municipalities, and we're working in the moment on the legal issue with Montreal. We have sent 2 legal notice, the formal notice to the city of Montreal. And now we're getting into the injunction because the city of Montreal says what you have claimed, it's not true. Health Canada is regulating the chemical that it's used for fluoridation. But even the province of Quebec, the public health says, no, the federal government does not regulate the product. So even the lawyer of the city of Montreal have not checked the facts. So they don't even do their basic job. And that's one thing we're going to bring in court, that they didn't do what they should have done as research. It's credible that a city does not take more attention to something like that. So in each cities, we have different approach depending on the situation, but we always find the proper way. But you have to work, and it's a teamwork. It's not 1 or 2 individual. So to start, you have to be 1 or 2, and then get many groups. Environmental groups are very useful. This have done very good work. That's why we work with Eau Secours in Quebec, and we have worked with groups like 20 different environmental groups at the same time. So this makes a lot of credibility right away. And we have scientific people on our team, and that's very important too.
Wow, great. So many different communications that you just mentioned. That was a multitude of communications. So you can see that any robust campaign will have multiple communications going on.
Even writing books. We have 3 or 4 books on against fluoridation in Quebec in French. So that also helps.
Yes, how to end fluoridation in your town comes down to mastering the messaging. So let's just take a few of those as examples, wonderful examples, like the letters to the editor, very important messaging. And it's interesting because it's called letter to the editor. So you might think at first the audience is the editor. And yes, indeed, it's the editor who chooses whether to publish your letter or not. But when you're writing the letter to the editor, who's your real audience?
That's the question. And that's another point. When you bring a message, don't bring 500 messages, just bring one or two, but put it deeply, get into it on a lot of scientific reference and things like that, so they cannot destroy the information. So if you break down the fact that fluoride will cause an increase of dental fluorosis, but you just develop all the data, including the US 65% incidence of dental fluorosis, and that's from the public health. So they cannot say this does not appear in Quebec or something like that.
So when you're writing a letter to the editor, the audience is the readership, the reader of the news outlet. Those are the people you want to reach. And again, you want to have a specific objective. So it has something to do with, typically there's an article that was written on some health related thing or something to do with the water. Rarely it's about fluoridation specifically, but when it is, you have clear, it's relevant to submit a letter to the editor. But as Gilles is saying, keep it simple, go narrow, make one point and make it strong. But it's really the readership of the outlet that's going to be your audience, and you want them to think, feel, or behave differently having received your message. Yeah, so often people think, well, my objective is to inform people, but we need to do more work than that. Like you're saying, we need to be very clear, inform them of what, based on who's the audience, what. Sometimes people try to inform others of things they already know, you say, try to go to a dentist and you say, fluoride causes fluorosis, and they already know that. So you want to think, what does your audience not already know when you want to inform them? And further, what if they knew that, how would that affect them? Would they do something different? Will they sign up for your campaign? Will they talk to their neighbor about it? Will they do anything different with that information? So given all the information there is, a mountain of information, Mount Everest of information, you could inform people. It'd be very selective of what do you want to inform them to achieve your objective.
Another point we try to do, it's send different letters from different groups, with one aspect in one group, one other aspect with another group. So the public health will be attacked on every aspect, or 5, 6, or 7 points, but only we develop 1 or 2 points in which we go more deeply, so deeply that the public health cannot answer. For example, the fact that fluoride increased the lead level, and the city have all lead pipes all through the city. So what will they do? The public health, for example, in Three Rivers said, we're changing 1 or 2% of the pipes every year. So it'll take another 40 years before they change everything. We're concerned about the lead. Now, you should also be concerned about the fluoride, because the fluoride is contaminated with lead that they're using, and beside the acid will dissolve more lead. And you got a huge amount of houses that have lead pipes for their entrance for the water. So what do you do with it? Yeah,
so the message is fluoridating our water increases lead exposure to children and others. You'd want to say, a certain amount, you want to definitely, it increases exposure. You say a significant amount or a health that they're to a degree that it increases the incidence of cognitive disorders or whatever. You definitely want to go all the way with those messages, but definitely everyone listen up as a model. You have different audiences and there's some overlap perhaps, but each audience, you look at your message and you say, is everything in here all and only what I need to say to this audience to achieve the objective I have for them?
And we've tried to put it so clearly that many groups will be reached at the same time.
Yeah. If you can get some overlap, definitely you can use the same message for different audiences if you have the same objective and they pretty much are the same. They have the same mindset. But you need to do that analysis. In fact, in a really robust campaign, you have so many messages going on that I recommend you create a spreadsheet with the columns: audience, objective, message. And then even put them in order, because, for example, with Marie, first audience is, the attendees at this conference. And the objective is to get them to give me their email address so I can follow up with them. The message is, here's some information that's relevant to you. Would you like to, and therefore, don't you want to learn more? And then the next line on your spreadsheet would be people who gave me their email addresses at that conference. The objective is to get them to come to an event. The message is, hey, we've got this great event where you get to learn more and, protect the children, learn more about how to protect the developing child, for example. So you actually create what's now called a communication plan, where you anticipate that one objective builds on another. Assuming you're successful with the first objective with that person, you bring them along to the next thing, all the time encouraging to get more and more involved in different degrees that's appropriate for them. And again, always paying attention: are my messages working, or are they not working? In which case you have the opportunity to tweak your messages until they do. And now I loved how you brought up debate, because, well, first of all, there's a kind of messaging that you need to develop to get a city or municipality to hold a debate, right? So in that case, your objective is to get somebody at the city to sponsor a debate. The audience would be somebody who has the authority to host a debate, and your objective is to get them to hold that debate. That's not an easy matter, right? Always in itself. It's just getting the debate is a big deal. So you have to have a pretty convincing message to some city official or some form of ally that even wants to put it up for debate. And then there's the debate itself. And I think of all communications, a debate might be the most elaborate, might be the most thorough communication you could probably give, because you have to, as you said, anticipate all of their arguments and have a rebuttal. So this is a very elaborate communication. The objective is, again, though, your audience is not your opponent in the debate. Your audience are the attendees at the debate. Your objective is to get people in the audience to refuse fluoridation and to join your campaign to end fluoridation. All the many messages, depending on how elaborate the debate is, if you have how many cycles, tell me about the debate you had. What was it like? How many people were debaters, and on each side, and how many times did you get to rebut and go back and forth?
I could say, yeah, in many towns it's different, but normally we have an attendee of 200 or 300 person at those meetings. And we have people in the attendees that will take care of asking the question directly to the proponent. So they have already question prepared, so they could put them into a box, I could say. So that's a trick. What is legal compound, or what's the impact on the environment and lead, or what's on the scientific publication on the reduction of the IQ or something like that. So the proponent will have to try to defend the position, and normally they're not very good in that job because they're not ready to see question coming from the public that is so direct and raise a very scientific question, for example.
Fantastic. Yeah. So there's different kinds of debates, different forums. that have rules. And yeah, there's from an official like Oxford style debate, where you have two people on each side, one certain time for rebuttal and all that. And then you have some other forms of forums that people call debates that are really just that, like question and answer. And those become very kind of messy, actually.
In
Unfortunately.
Richmond, it was funny because the public health asked that those that would present the PowerPoint presentation would not assist to their presentation. But we knew what they would be because we have been in many presentations, so we know exactly what they're going to bring up. So our rebuttal is already prepared when we do present our position. And after each side have present without being there, then the public is asking questions, but they're already, we have people in the attendee that are ready to, I could say, bring the right answer because they were there for both sides. So they're ready to ask the right questions.
Wow, that's an elaborate communication plan with multiple people delivering the message and working
Exactly.
together. Yeah, so something as simple as getting somebody's email address all the way up to a very elaborate and messy debate style forum in front of hundreds of people. They're all communications. And I really do encourage you to practice identifying the audience, your objective, and then crafting your message accordingly, paying attention to whether your message works to achieve that objective with that audience, change it as necessary, and keep at it. So anyway, this is a wonderful, wonderful time together. We're really doing great service to step 5, master the message, from the book Something in the Water. So if anyone else has communication they want to work on or some experience, we've talked about, what have we gone over already? We've gone petition of redress of grievances to elected officials, legal complaints in courts of law, debates, lobbying elected officials just to have a debate, letters to the editor, following up with people that you meet and get their email and inviting them to join your campaign in some way or other. There's just so many different communications. And again, to simplify it, if you keep those 3 elements in play, it'll really serve you well over time. Next month, the second Saturday in North America and Western Europe, and Sunday morning in New Zealand and Australia, we will be meeting again, and it's going to be step 6. I don't know how many of you have got the book and are reading the chapter in advance. That would be advisable. Read the chapter in advance of the meeting, and that way you have the very basics of the topic, and then we can spend our time going deeper and developing the topic and applying it to our various campaigns. Step 6 next month, June, will be turn passion into action. And that is the chapter dedicated to day in and day out strategizing. So if we're following along, we've step 1, we've confronted the deception. Step 2, we've worked to protect ourselves and others. We've mapped our jurisdiction in step 3, so we know the lay of the land. In step 4, we've chosen a broad strategy, a broad avenue toward victory. And today we've developed very deeply how to create effective messages and to see that messaging is everywhere in your campaign. So the next step really logically is to talk about how do we turn all of this passion to action. And I'm going to introduce to you in the book, you can read all about it. It's called dynamic strategizing. And it's a really effective and, once again, simple way of quickly evaluating what your objectives, immediate objectives for your campaign are, and what resources you have in terms of assets and behaviors that will help you achieve those objectives. And to see that assets, behaviors, and objectives are always in constant dynamic play with each other. And as a leader of campaign, you want to be aware and very honest and objective about what are your outcomes, your assets and behaviors at any particular time. and then strategically work to increase your assets, increase the behaviors to allow for greater and greater outcomes. Again, it's a wonderful way to understand how to get things done, considering that you have a group of people who are passionate about ending fluoridation in your town. I look forward to being with you again. Look for an email from us. I request that you go ahead and share those emails with others, even if you think that they might be receiving them. Email is getting more and more restrictive. I believe that I have a suspicion that some of these big tech companies are filtering our emails in the sense that they might throw it in people's spam or promotions box so they don't see it. And that's a real challenge that we've been facing more and more as campaigners. So as I'm inviting you to please make sure that your email provider knows to receive and to prioritize in your inbox email coming from Fluoride-Free Campaigns. The email itself is info@fluoridefreecampaigns.com. To make sure you do that by either making an entry in your address book associated with your email, or in however you work with your software provider, your email provider, I mean, and your even the software that you use to read your emails. If it's different, make sure that they know to prioritize emails coming from us, and then please do turn around and share them on social media, and forward the email to the people you know would be interested. So just as I'm asking you to do that, you'll probably be needing to do that in your campaigns as well. You need to make an extra effort to help people stay connected. It's not like email has been in the past. Years ago, email was pretty reliable getting to people, but now there's so much spam. There's just so much banning, shadow banning, it's called, that we have to really work hard to connect with each other. And I do want to connect with you all. And I do look forward to our Saturdays and Sundays on the second weekend of every month. And if there's any more shout out right now, any other final comments?
I just appreciate you. I appreciate you being so dedicated to this and herding us all along. That's wonderful.
Well, thanks for the acknowledgement, Maria. I do it as a matter of service. And I know that the book and these videos are going to be of great service. So the fact that you're here and bringing forth real concrete activities, whether you're just getting started or you've been doing it for years and years and years, like Gilles, we all learn together, and it's because of the real life examples that we have something to talk about, and not just abstract talk. It's real action.
Clint, you have been there since so many years and have been so helpful and stimulating also. So we're very happy to have you.
Oh, great. Yeah, I think I found my proper role. I found a good way to be of service, and it is fulfilling. So I bless you all. I thank you all, and I wish you all the best. Be in contact between now and next month if you like, but we definitely will be together again in June. All right, au revoir.
Wow.